You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, humor-filling, motivation-loving life hacks and empowerment tips for all of the medically indulged people in your life. I'm Dominique Vale, founder of InvisiYouth Charity and the host of the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, and today is episode 34 of Season 3B, and it is one of our topics on high demand at InvisiYouth, so I'm super excited to not only have a whole episode talking about this topic, about something that is a very important thing, but then also having a guest that is such a fantastic dynamic duo. I'm breaking it into it in the beginning. That is, I have one human guest, but I have two guests, so there is a difference. I'm excited to get everyone to know our special guest for the episode is Invisible, Disabilities, and Service Dog activist Bri Harris and her medical alert and service dog Arrow. Bri has dynamic disabilities like POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome in the dysautonomia realm, as well as panic disorder and chronic migraines. And so having a service medical alert dog like Arrow has been super beneficial in her quality of life and in her day-to-day. And now, recently celebrating her 4th birthday, Arrow, who is a German short-haired pointer, is not only such a wonderful multi-purpose service dog and has the best model face and jawline of all the dogs on Instagram, but she's super spunky and versatile, and I always say versatile and intelligent, which you really get to see so often through their social media platform and their activism, making her such a wonderful representation for service dogs and such a great candidate showing that. Arrow even went to university with Bri, where she studied art activism and advocacy for individuals with disability and service dog law and policy, which is perfect because Bri now works as a direct support professional for a nonprofit called PathPoint in California, which is a group aiding those in job coaching that have disabilities, mental health diagnoses, and youth, really helping strengthening them in the workplace with their abilities. So just like if you look on Instagram and you saw our link, Bri and Arrow, and their love for Disneyland, you will, if you all know, you'll love my pun for this. This episode is what dreams are made for. Yes, that was a Lizzie McGuire movie reference, and if you're too young, look it up. It's a fantastic movie. So Bri, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So excited. And so, I know having us, we have, if you guys are on YouTube, which you definitely should, not only are you seeing Bri, but our second special guest for the episode is Arrow, who is chilling in that corner, looking adorable, everyone. So I'm super excited, and we're going to jump right in with our first segment, Getting to Know Bri, called Remember the Last Time.
Remember the last time. Do you remember the last time?
Remember the Last Time is our fun and quirky segment with our guest, where we talk about, as the title says, all of the different things that she's done the last time. So it's insightful questioning, it's quite fun, and we're going to get to know Bri better. So we're going to dive right in, Bri. As I always like to talk to all of my 20-somethings like myself, last TikTok or Instagram reel trend that you were very interested in when you saw?
Oh man. All I'm thinking about right now is the reel I made for Arrow's birthday at Disney. It's not really a trend, but it was something I wanted to capture that moment. I used to be on TikTok. I'm not really present on there as much anymore, but I'm kind of just barely dabbling with reels. So
I love it. What about the last place you and Arrow went to?
We went to a movie theater. Yeah, we went not last night, but the night before, out to a movie theater, which was a big deal and really exciting. We saw a scary movie. I love scary movies. So, and she was so funny because she did like 20 heart rate alerts whenever I was like startled and jumping, but otherwise she's just like laying down, sleeping, and then, oh gosh, I have to get up again and do this, and then goes under again. And so it was fun though.
What about the last fun purchase you made for yourself?
Right now I'm collecting Disney ears, of course. So that would probably be what it is. I recently just like splurged and bought like 3 of them, and my mom's like, "What are you doing?" But since the pandemic, I'm always loved Disney, but since the pandemic, I've been really drawn to get ears lately. So I got some really fun ones, and I'm excited to wear them once it actually opens the park. So
yeah, oh, absolutely. I know, hopefully, fingers crossed, that gets to happen soon.
yeah.
What about the last time Arrow did something that made you laugh?
Oh man, probably this morning, honestly. She is so silly and spunky. I woke up literally to her full on spooning me. I was laying to my side and her paw was over my shoulder and her face was nestled in my neck, and she's just passed out and she's fully holding on to me. And it was just the funniest thing. I put it on my Instagram story, but it was so adorable. And I was like, I want to get up, but this is also just like so comforting and adorable. So I love how she's a cuddle bug.
Oh, I love that. I'm giving me FOMO of having no dogs now. What about the last time you mailed a physical letter?
That's a good one. I recently made some mask lanyards out of like beads, and I mailed those to a couple of my friends and wrote like a letter in it. Actually, one of them I put dysautonomia awareness on it. So yeah, when you wear it, it says it on the lanyard. And I've like fallen in love with mask lanyards because they are a great way to keep your mask clean and on you and not lose them. And so I did that recently.
I have to say, my sister is a teacher, and a couple months ago she had one mask lanyard, and it was like a whole new world for her wearing a mask. She was like, "This is so efficient."
It really is. It's so nice.
What would be the last moment you had a super proud dog moment with Arrow?
That's a good one. We do have them on a daily. I mean, honestly, probably the movie theater, because it's been over a year since we had gone. I mean, she's always done really great in movies, but there is this kind of, nervousness that goes into a movie because it has to be so quiet, and I was a little nervous about how she was going to react after all this time. But thankfully, I mean, it could be a movie with dogs barking or other animals or really loud, or a scary movie, and can sleep pretty much through it all until she needs to assist me, which is really great. So I mean, I was definitely a little nervous about it because of all the time it's taken since we've gone, but she did really awesome. It was just like right back into before the pandemic, ignoring popcorn and staying right under my seat and right in my space. And yeah, so that was probably the recent one.
I love that. That's a good. We're gonna end on Arrow just getting an A+ at the movie theater for this segment for sure. And even going right off of that, the one thing I had told Bri when we were chatting before the episode that I loved is being a host, that you tend to kind of take an authority position when you do interviews. And this is one of the times where I get to be the curious guest hosting a show and letting Bri take over and be the fantastic guru of knowledge when it comes to the service dog world and activism. So we're going to go right into that. And I'm going to have Bri be my personal Alexa, and we're going to go into Top Search.
Top Search. You got the Top Search.
With Top Search, we know that people will tell you to just Google it, especially for the chronic illness disability community. We know we have to tell a lot of our friends and family to Google things so they can understand. And a lot of times that Google autofill can be very funny and a little bit confusing. So in this segment, we are going to, like I said, have Bri become my personal Alexa or Siri, depending on your preference of tech, and have you, Bri, answer a lot of the big questions that we've gotten over the years when it has come to service dogs. So the main one we have gotten quite a bit over the years is, what would be the inclinations of somebody thinking about getting a service dog? Like for yourself, what kind of led you into that path of thinking that would be good?
Yeah, that path is definitely different for every person. I definitely tried a wide variety of other options and things that could help me, find the support I need to be able to mitigate my disabilities, and before even thinking about a service dog. And then before getting a service dog, I also did a lot of research, a lot of reading about, because there's research that needs to be done in terms of your country and your state's policies on service dogs or assistance animals, but as well as a breed and what kind of dog you would work for your lifestyle and your personality, but also your needs, and what sort of training that consists of. Because there's a lot of different routes you can go, and you can get a pre-trained program trained dog, or you can get a partially program trained dog, or do self-training, and each way has a different routes to kind of investigate and do research on and look into, depending on your life and your needs.
Yeah, and I love how you said that because like you say it quite a bit through your activism. It's a commitment. It's another living, breathing individual next to you. So you trying out those different options of different medical accessories, different adaptations to your day-to-day, and trying a bunch of other things that you could quickly add or remove from your life first, and then that kind of being a big step to make. Being able to kind of exhaust a bunch of other options first is a really good thing for people, because a lot of times that's a very big step to make, like you said, without putting in the work of research as well behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of research, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of money that goes into it, and you can do all the right things and it still not work out. And that's the biggest thing that a lot of people don't entirely realize is, I mean, there are of course fun parts of it, of getting a dog, but that is a serious responsibility and financial burden, honestly. But also, yeah, it is a real full-on commitment that you invest so much in, including your heart, of course, but that really ultimately might not work out. It might not be as helpful for you as you initially thought it would be. The dog might not want to work or be fit to go into public appropriately and assist you. And that's a constant state for a service dog handler. You can go somewhere and something can happen to your dog and they're not able to work anymore. They wake up and they don't really want to work anymore. Or something can happen and it startles them and they have a hard time recovering from that. And that happens very often. And it is scary at times. It's a risk, but it is also worth it. There are good, incredible days moments where I'm like, wow, like she's really teaching me how to advocate for myself and to be my own warrior. Hence why I named her Arrow, actually, is the idea of learning to be my own warrior and find my own strength internally. So, and right now it makes sense for my life to have her with me, but I mean, things change, you never know. And that's also extremely natural and something that I think handlers don't always consider, that it might work right now in your time in life, but in 5 years that might change, so yeah.
Yeah, like with chronic illness, you're always told to be flexible and adaptive, and that kind of having a service animal as well, that you have to kind of carry that trait over into that part of your life as well. And it kind of goes well into a big one we get, and I know you give a lot of tips on, is, when people go out in public and they see a dog, whether they have their vest or their harness on or not, people immediately, especially kids, love to immediately go over and want to pet an animal. So I know that's a big thing, is if someone really wants to approach someone who you can tell from what they're wearing that it is probably a service animal, what would you suggest to people of how to interact when somebody from the public wants to come approach your dog, and people who also vice versa do want to approach an individual with an animal? What are things that have been nice if someone came over to you and Arrow, how they kind of approached that to you?
Yeah, we get asked this a lot. It really honestly depends on the team. And when I say team, I mean the individual and the dog, on their preference. For me personally, I am typically okay with it and comfortable, and I prefer individuals that are curious to come up and nicely, you know, say like, oh, like, can I say hi to your dog? I know they're working. I kind of like when someone acknowledges, oh, I know that they're working, or maybe they're not entirely sure and they ask, oh, is she working? Like, is it okay if I say hello? And oftentimes I have a release command for Arrow in terms of I'll say, okay, like, and I have a signal for her to know that she can break heel and say hello. And it's great for Arrow particularly, and a lot of other dogs, to get that break and that social interaction. A lot of times, especially if they love people, to know that, okay, like if I'm doing really good and and my handler's doing really good, and they say it's okay, I can go and smell and say hi and be a normal dog for a couple of seconds. And that really does make a difference on days we're working all day, you know, and she's in her mode all day, to kind of just reground her, refocus her. So that's something I find really helpful, and also a great way to have a conversation with individuals about invisible disabilities, chronic illness, service dogs, disability in general.
Yeah.
If I have, you know, the energy, the spoons for that. On times where I don't, I typically will try to find really nice ways to say like, oh, I'm really sorry, like she's working right now, is normally what I'll try to say. It's important for people to understand that you never really know entirely what's going on, that even if you say hi and want to pet the dog and ask to pet the dog, the handler has the right to say no. And it's not always personal. It's sometimes the dog is tasking and doing their job and you might not even realize it. Or the dog is easily distractible and is in training, or the individual is just not comfortable with that interaction in that moment. So it's really important to just be mindful of that and respect those preferences.
Yeah, and it kind of, I know it's when I was thinking of this question, because I know we get it quite a bit, the one thing, even outside of having an animal, is even if you have medical equipment on you, we'll get oftentimes a lot of our teens and 20-somethings who use a wheelchair or a cane. A lot of times kids will come over and immediately kind of want to touch their material and what they're using. And I'll always say, especially for having younger kids coming over, that's not something, if they haven't interacted with it, they don't know kind of that barrier. It's just pure wonder and curiosity, and they come over. And I always tell them, have your like one or two backup answers for when people ask those questions or take that step into your space, and really do kind of have that answer of being, of curbing your reaction of saying like, oh, I always like to keep my equipment to myself, or kind of move it back. I always say you can do kind of subconscious movement of moving your item away from the person while you verbally engage with them, if you can, is super great, because a lot of times those other people will kind of, as we say, they'll read the room if they can tell you're kind of like wheeling back a few inches, and then they'll be like, okay, I guess she doesn't want me to grab it. So I think that, like you said as well, is being able that for you to kind of use how you're feeling in that moment, whether you or an Arrow as well, whether she's doing something and tasking with you versus you're like, okay, we can kind of have, you said like release and give her that little break and then bring her back into it. And I think that as well for other people, I always will joke, the healthy and non-disabled, always read the room. If you're going to go into somebody's space, just read. If they look like they don't want to answer the question, stop asking the question, tends to be the good reply to that.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of individuals forget that their medical equipment for individuals a lot of times is an extension of themselves.
Yeah.
And it is an extra sort of challenge with a service dog, in that even though to you they are your partner and legally considered your medical equipment, a lot of individuals associate dog with pet and cute, fluffy, I want to play with it. So there is that extra kind of like background association with dogs that make it a little more complicated and complex. I definitely am way more sympathetic to young kids that are just excited and run up to her. And that is something too, like in terms of training and behavior, that is so important with service dogs, that they are able to handle unpredictable situations of a young child running up, grabbing their face, being in their space, and being able to calmly still stay focused and, be safe to the public. So, especially places like Disney, that's super common, especially if I decide that day to dress her up and put her in Disney ears or something, kids, beam and love that. And will ask really great questions, but yeah, it's really important to consider that.
And even kind of going off of that too, you had mentioned researching about the type of dog that you have. People always ask, can any type of dog go into that training, or does breed matter in that regard? So how was that? Because I know you trained Arrow yourself, so it wasn't the mindset of going to a company or an agency and they have dogs there, and then obviously the choice of size and breed is done for you.
Right.
So what would you say when people say, oh, well, can any dog or type of dog be a service dog?
Yeah, it's a great question. In the US, according to the ADA, any breed of dog can legally be a service dog. However, there are higher success rates with certain breeds. And I always say that, again, really going into, okay, like what are different tasks different dogs do for the disabilities I have? What certain things can the dog do that would actually help and improve my life? And then looking into what your life is like. Are you active? Do you work? Do you go to school? Where do you live? What's the climate like? All these small things. And then looking into the breed that would fit all of those categories, right? If you have a dog, if you need some light mobility or any mobility in general, you need to have a dog that is a certain size and health, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something extremely important to consider. You wouldn't get a dog that couldn't handle that, or has a lot of medical issues or something like that, unfortunately. So there's definitely breeds that are picked and chosen more often specifically for their success rate. I have found that with the German short hair, they are a lot of dog. They're definitely not for everybody, but they also are very hard workers, very intelligent, and some of the most versatile dogs. So, I mean, she is ready to go all the time. And that really works for my lifestyle and my personality, my needs. So in that aspect, I couldn't have picked a better breed, but it just really depends on what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, not only is Arrow photogenic, but you can tell when she's doing certain tasks on your Instagram story. You can tell you can tell by her face when she has her working face on or her mom I want to play face on. You can definitely see her energy is very different in both of those, which is really nice. And kind of the last question, which is it feels like a very layered question, but just sort of in general, we do get that question quite a bit of what the difference between a service animal versus an emotional support animal or therapy dog would be. So is there like a main, on your end, distinction kind of between those three different types of dogs? Besides, I know the big thing people get surprised on is there isn't some national organization that you're registered having Arrow. That's in pretty much every country we work in Canada, the UK, Australia, and the States. That's not something any of those countries have, is sort of a national registration. So when it comes to those three different types, what are kind of the major differences that would define those different types of dogs, and then their handlers' needs as well?
Right. The biggest difference between the dogs all depends on their training and their access rights, right? So between the three, the lowest sense of access rights would be an emotional support dog. A lot of them are often confused as service dogs. Or a type of service dog, when in reality they legally are not service dogs. They have a little more access than pets, but they still are extremely valid and helpful for individuals with disabilities, that might not need a full-on service dog, but, could really benefit medically from having, that companionship. And that's what it really comes down to. It's about companionship. So an emotional support animal is not required to have any sort of specific trainings, any special training. And that is because they are not legally allowed to go out into non-pet friendly places, right? Unless it's, for the US, it's housing related. I don't know if it's different in other states or countries, but, and a little bit above that would be a therapy dog. And a therapy dog does have specific training. It typically is trained through a program, through a company that trains dogs specifically for therapy work. And they're allowed to go to certain places when invited. So, a hospital might look up therapy dog corporations or companies and then ask them, hey, like, can you come in on these days during the week? And they would bring their dogs in with their handlers that are trained to be in those specific, very specific environments and how to handle those environments. And they're there to provide, similar to an emotional support animal, that comfort and companionship, but instead of to one individual, like an emotional support animal, with a therapy dog, it's to multiple people, a bunch of people, all the people basically that are in that area. So it's common in hospitals, like I mentioned, nursing homes, assisted living homes, schools, airports, things like that. So that's the dog that you see and you want to ask to pet or engage with, right?
Yeah.
But again, they don't have that full access. And then above that would be a service dog, which is really the biggest difference between a therapy dog and an emotional support is their training specifically. They have very specific training requirements. They have to be able to be appropriately in public, which means being fully under control, being potty trained, and those are just the basics. And as well as know at least one task, be task trained, meaning they have to know one behavior or action that directly mitigates or assists that individual, that handler with their disability. So I like to kind of describe it as the three things that make a service dog are: one, the handler is disabled. They have to be disabled or chronically ill. Two, the dog has to be public access trained, be able to be in public appropriately. And three, be task trained. And those three things. Beyond that, at least in the US, there isn't anything beyond those three things, which people are really shocked about. As you mentioned, the registries, there are no registry certifications. Those ID cards, they're not legal. They're not legally recognized by the government, essentially. So they essentially don't really need anything. The biggest thing, it's kind of like an honor system is how it's developed. And the ADA specifically did that to make it more accessible to more individuals, right? So they make it where you can train your own service dog, because not everyone has $20,000 to $30,000 that they can get on a program trained dog, right?
Yeah.
So if you train your own dog, okay, the best way to make that accessible is to have, this honor system of how they behave, how they're trained, and who they're for, and kind of hope that people respect that.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately we all know that we see, poorly behaved dogs in public that are mislabeled as service. So yeah, those are the primary differences between the three.
I love what I've noticed through the years with InvisiYouth is finding more individuals through our volunteers or our wider network, how you and I connected even through Instagram as well, is seeing so many people in that public social media activism. Something even in your highlights is showcasing Arrow doing tasks, and it is seeing that fit for somebody is super helpful, because like you said, seeing a harness and a vest can sort of just be an immediate recognizer for a general public, but watching Arrow on your end doing tasks with you, it looks like step by step, it's a whole process, and you watch them doing it, which for a lot of people, especially through social media, that's really a benefit, is people getting that exposure of not just you or an individual taking photos with their service animal or their emotional support animal or therapy animal, but then taking that step of you showing tasks and the actual sort of trained activities that Arrow does. And that really, I have most of the experience I've had is with therapy dogs for people with mental illness or mental health, and then also in the hospital setting. But it is a very blatant difference. They have a training, but it's with so many different people, and each service dog is individualized. And I think that's even Arrow is very unique in the way that she does her tasks with you. And like I said, she's got the laser focus. Like she knows, so okay, my handler needs something, and the process starts. And I think that's a really big benefit for people, is being able to, like you said, get that exposure and have them watch what that actually looks like is really beneficial.
Right. And I think it's helpful too, also for people to kind of better understand, okay, like an emotional support animal is more about companionship and comfort, which is not a task. Emotional support's not a task. And then that difference of like, oh, like these are obviously very specific to that individual trained behaviors and actions. So yeah, I find it very valuable to show those things, and I appreciate that you see that too.
Absolutely. And even going off of that, before we go into our intermission segment, where we all know, you guys know it's the best time of the show, our intermission segment. Before, if you're watching on YouTube, you just saw Bri went, oh God, it's the middle segment of the show. Before we go into that, I always like to thank everyone listening on our audio podcast platforms, whichever you choose, and on our YouTube channel if you're watching the show, which you should subscribe now, that'll pop up everywhere. Is that this is one of our virtual programs for InvisiYouth charity, and so they get to be provided for free internationally every month from wonderful people who donate across the year and throughout that. So we always put our donation link below so that people can not only learn more about us and learn a lot more about our guests like Bri and Arrow and the work that they do in the invisible disabilities community and service dog community, but then also really seeing how that is a major portion of a lot of the young adults that are a part of InvisiYouth and really need that support in the activism and their day-to-day lifestyle management and improvement on their day-to-day. So we always thank our donors of every size and everywhere that we work. It's super beneficial to us to keep our programming. Every subscribe, 5 stars, like button, we always say, review always helps us keep this program and be able to reach more young people. So we thank you guys for being able to not only subscribe to the show and our channels and interact with us and share it, but then also supporting the nonprofit and the programming we do all year. And going off of that, get ready for our intermission segment. It's story time, everybody. Welcome to So That One Time.
So that one time.
Yeah.
I'm excited. You're making me very anxious with
yeah, I have been thinking about what I can share, and there really is, having Arrow since 2017, there are so many different things I could share. I mean, because of how integrated I've had her in my life. Like you mentioned, university, traveling cross country for several years for college, living in Los Angeles, going to work with me, all sorts of things, which has presented naturally its own experiences. I mean, we have very interesting experiences all the time.
Puppy Arrow, I have to say, you posted on National Puppy Day this year. It was a real Arrow is a very beautiful dog, like very model, angular, has that good jawline now. Puppy Arrow, freaking cute. I died of adorable Arrow in that video. I went, stop it, baby Arrow. So cute.
She was too much. I know, she was basically just all ears as a baby. So. But one of the things we started actually very young was going to Disney, as you mentioned, since I have family in the entertainment industry. And so going to Disney has always been something really close to my family. It makes me feel close to my family members, even those that are not with us anymore or live in different states now. So my mom and I, and myself, even by myself, I've gone before very often. And there was one point where I was really struggling with my mental health and specifically with my panic disorder, which does fluctuate, of course, as we all know, with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was extremely phobic of was not knowing where a restroom was and being fearful of like essentially crapping my pants, right? So, and I share this because I've heard other people share similar stories, and it's been really helpful for me and liberating for me as an individual, knowing that I'm not the only one that is fearful of that thing, and or has been through that. So one of the things that happened to me, I mean, I there was one summer I was not able to even leave my house. Like it was really hard. I didn't want to go drive like several miles just because I was fearful that I was going to poop myself. and it's in the moment, it is so real, but like every time afterward or sharing about it, my ridiculous poop stories, my friends say, it's pretty hilarious now. So there was one time I was like, all right, like I'm going to try to go to Disney. Like we're going to try to do this. And it's about like 40 minutes. So it was a big deal in the moment to drive, especially, but the biggest trigger was being in the car and being in traffic. So we were driving. And I was doing great. I did great the whole time. I was not worried about it at all. And then we get to the parking lot and it's a wall of cars just stopped. And I had a full on panic attack. And I literally was like, I was out of my mind. I wasn't seeing straight. Couldn't breathe. I was just like, my poor mother, I literally just bolt out the car in the middle of like the streets. Like, I mean, there are lines to get in, but it's in the parking lot. It's still like not where people walk. I bolted out, I grabbed Arrow, and I'm running through the cars. I'm weaving through cars because I literally think I'm going to freaking crap my pants. And I'm like freaking out, and I know there's like a bathroom, like once you get into the parking lot on the other side of the gates, there's a bathroom. And so I knew it was there. So I'm running and I'm like, not in my right mind. I'm all over. People are like looking at me and like honking, like, and it's just like, oh my God. I tried to jump a fence with Arrow. And like, I was worried that like Disneyland security was just going to come over and take me down. And then I was going to be pooping all over them. And it was a hot mess. Anyway, so I was like, that's it. Like, I can't hold it. So I run back to the car and I started doing this thing. It was actually my mom's idea to help try to comfort me and mitigate that panic moment, was to create a poop kit. So it's essentially like a mason jar and like wipes and like toilet paper and like extra stuff, just like not to actually use, but just for a peace of mind of like, if there was an emergency, I have this thing, right? And that was the first time I was like, F it. We're
opening this bag today.
I am pooping in a mason jar. I was like, here we go. And I literally went in the car and that's what I said to my mom. And she was like, are you kidding me? Like, no. She was like, you can't be doing this. You can't be doing this. I had overalls on too. So it was a moment, but I literally just like took a blanket. And so sure enough, I was going in the mason jar and we started driving and we're driving and so I'm like, are you kidding me? Now we're driving and they're like, it's too late now. Like it's just happening. And Arrow's such a good girl. She's like trying to, mitigate. She's trying to do DPT on me, which I was like kind of okay with, but also like preoccupied. So it was like a thing. And so literally we're like going and we get to the ticket booth and the guy's like, hey, back there, like, how you doing? And I'm just like, I'm in the jar, like, hi, like, oh my God, it was so embarrassing and ridiculous, but it worked. I mean, I sealed it up, just put it in a bag, tossed it. It was clean. It was a talented moment for me, and we had a great rest of the day, and I was perfectly fine. But I thought I was gonna die of embarrassment and just in pure panic. But that is my Disneyland poop story.
Oh my, Disney needs to add that to their commercials at that point, showing that their staff will still be all warm and engaging, even if they can feel like something's wrong in the vehicle.
Yeah. I mean, they couldn't see anything. I had like a blanket over me, but it was still
No,
just
she's
like,
really cold. It's California. She's really cold.
yeah, exactly, right? Oh my goodness. So.
And good thing, like you said, good thing when you said picking breeds in your lifestyle, good thing Arrow's breed is very much an outdoorsy athletic, because she would have ran right with you. Mom, we need to go into like a 100-meter dash. I'm ready. Let's get this going.
She's more agile than me. So if I can do it, if I can jump the fence, she can jump the fence. Like, I was like, she is the most agile dog I've ever seen and been around. And yeah, whatever. I'm like, I'm never really worried about it. People will be like, oh, your dog, like, can you go through here, go in this place? And it's like, if I can do it, she can do it. And that's just kind of how not only I've trained her and kind of worked with her as my extension of myself, but also because she thankfully is very capable because of her breed.
Okay.
Dog.
And moral of that story before we go into our next segment is that if you think something bizarre or weird happens to you, 95% of the time there are more people in your community that have experienced it. Everyone will think I'm never gonna share that, and that nobody else has had this issue but me. I'm telling you, you will find someone who went, oh, my sibling has dealt with that, or I do. And so I thoroughly appreciate you sharing that, because like you said, it's the unglamorous, sometimes you want to kind of like keep in the back of your mind things that you deal with when you have a chronic illness or disability that are the most relatable parts of it. So I not only appreciate that, but I know a bunch of people listening will go, oh, thank God I'm not the only one. I can finally feel like there's someone else.
That's my hope through my humiliation. That is my hope.
That is everyone who volunteers with us will know that anytime my volunteers work with me directly, I tend to always bring out an embarrassing story of my 13 years of chronic illness. I always say, I've got, what would you need? And I will provide one from the folder of experiences I have. I will find one that will work for you.
I love it.
And speaking of, I can imagine in an ideal world for Bri, there would be immediate blue light system of where bathrooms would be in your area. So that's my seamless transition into our next segment. We're going to talk about in an ideal world. In an ideal world, we often talk about at InvisiYouth wanting to change those stigmas, erase misconceptions, and make a world that's not only more inclusive and diverse, but accessible for those in the chronic illness disability community. But those can be some pretty big boulders to roll up the hill yourself, especially when you are like myself and cannot manage with nerve damage on half of your body. So we talk about what would be things that myself and our guests would want to create in an ideal world. And with Bri, which is really exciting, you've kind of heard through her mentioning of stories with Arrow, is that she has had Arrow in 3 major areas of life during her university life, currently in her professional life, and then also in her daily life and her social life. So we're gonna branch into those 3 areas and talk about, in an ideal world, things that she's experienced and that she knows through her work with the wider service dog community too, things that would really make that interaction and those experiences beneficial and that you can learn from too. So kind of going off of that, I know we mentioned that Arrow went with you. You are from the West Coast in California. You went to university on the East Coast at Hampshire. And so what having Arrow in that university setting, and a lot of especially young people who have service animals before and are now transitioning into it or end up getting one while they're in university, what were things that were beneficial for you, not only bringing Arrow with you to university, but having that interaction with professors or classmates that made it a better experience for you?
My first year I went to college, I didn't have Arrow, and I kind of had this mindset of, I graduated from high school, I got into college, I'm set, I'm good, I don't need supports. And that obviously didn't work, as a lot of us know with disability and chronically ill community, that is not really realistic. So I ended up failing one of my courses and taking time off. I ended up one semester turned into 3 semesters. And during that time, I was actually spending a lot of time with my family's dog, and really saw the benefit she had on my healing through that, because I had a lot of pain and like just pain towards myself and feeling of being a failure and that sort of thing through that whole process that I just really internally needed to heal from. And that's when the start of me looking into getting a service dog happened. And when I got Arrow, it gave me kind of the courage to reapply to Hampshire College, where I went in Western Massachusetts. And I trained Arrow through like kind of the nitty gritty puppy stuff at home during the summer. And then I decided to go back. She was about 5 months old around or so. So she was still in training when we first went back. And that was an interesting experience because a huge portion of her training was done in university.
She went to school too.
Yeah, she really did. And it was a great learning experience for her to be exposed to a lot of different, individuals and scenarios, to practice a lot of long down stays and that sort of thing, was really helpful. But at first, yeah, it was really difficult. I think a lot of first time handlers experience this kind of, you're not really sure what to say or how to handle the fact that you have a service dog. What do you tell the professors, or what do you tell people when you go to certain places, like even just in your regular life? Do I tell my potential employer that I have a service dog? Do I tell the restaurant I'm going to or the hotel I'm staying at I have a service dog? So there are those sort of real things that a lot of handlers experience. And I was really going through a lot of that in the university setting. And thankfully, a lot of what I was studying was, like you mentioned, disability. So, and then it kind of molded into service dog as well, and animal behavior, service dog training, law and policy, that sort of thing. So that really helped the training a lot, working with other individuals in the animal behavior community and the disability community in my school. So it was really helpful. But I did have a moment pretty early on where a professor was not accepting whatsoever of me having Arrow. And it was my first real huge access issue of, it was like, there's no way she can be in here. I mean, it was the first time I had one of the first classes I took Arrow too. And I got there early with her to help her settle down. Now, can I say she's just such a fast settler. She is a queen of tucking, I call it, which tucking is like when they have to go underneath the table or underneath your chair and fit into a small space. I call her the queen of tucking. But yeah, and the professor in front of everybody was like, you can't be in here with her. And it took me back to like when I was younger and being called out of like, oh, everyone in special ed, like, or, that sort of thing, like so-and-so, go, to the other room. And so it took me, I was like sobbing and just a wreck. And now I'm a much different, I carry myself very differently with Arrow, and I'm more confident with Arrow, and so I know what to say more. But before, you don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And she was very harsh. And the funny thing is, it was like an art class. It was like an open studio class. So it wasn't even like an intimate, like tiny, like,
oh no.
So weird. It was really weird. But the worst part is actually accessibility wasn't the most helpful with it. And I think it was mainly who was there at the time, but also them also just not knowing how to navigate. That's something that I like to point out to a lot of individuals. It's like, sometimes access issues is really about other individuals not knowing how to navigate. And sometimes it's really hard. You have to take like your internal, triggers and kind of emotions with it and the pain of it, and just really like understand that it's not always personal. It's not always like out of it. It is a negative stigma that is ingrained in our society that you have to really, I've been trying to really change through trying to take my personal heart out of it, as emotionally draining as it is. So yeah, it was a really difficult thing, but it prepared me for, going into now a professional career and a job, and because I had a similar experience with that. And I don't remember exactly what other aspects.
You were really answering it well, in the sense that you were, something we'll really say, especially for anyone with a disability or chronic illness. I had accommodations during my time at university as well, even though all of everything, what people would traditionally assume is if you have a physical disability or an intellectual disability, that's when you gain access to accommodations. And in a university, especially, you do have a lot more flexibility in terms of, I had medical letters from my internists and neurologists and cardiologists sort of backing what they knew I needed medically, and then having accommodations kind of meet me in the middle. And I always, even internationally, it's every university has a different sort of policy and program. And we'll always say, like you said, getting a service animal, that legwork of the research is vital. That really kind of goes into your university searching as well, is seeing what that accommodation process looks like through them, what that program looks like. Because even on my end with chronic illness, I had professors as well who, because they couldn't see my issues medically, because it was more internally based with organs, they were very confused why I needed certain things, why I always say if I hobbled in late, it was because my nerve damage in my leg and I couldn't feel my leg, and I had to walk across campus through different housing in Philadelphia, trying to navigate stairs, and I would get to class late, and a lot of professors turn you away, and I was the one that would have to like knock on the glass of the locked door and be like, I'm allowed in, as the other kids who were late would not be allowed in, and just me, and having to navigate that. But like you said too, it's a lot of it is giving yourself kind of the reassurance of, if it doesn't go well the first time, you can kind of grow from every experience. And that, with that one professor, allowed you to be able to kind of navigate what it would be like interacting with someone who just couldn't be open-minded right away. And in a university setting, that's super helpful, like you said, even transitioning that into your professional setting. The one thing I loved that you mentioned when we first chatted was you talk about the benefits and the assets of you with Arrow in a job. So, and you even said interviewing wise, you had Arrow as an asset that you would bring. I'm bilingual, so I can bring a second language, but you have Arrow. And so so even professionally, what would you suggest to people who, even in the twofold, who have a service animal and they're nervous to disclose that right away because of wanting to be employed, but also who have a chronic illness or disability and know they might need to bring things with them when they go into a job on certain days?
Right. I think so often we're taught that disability and chronic illness. When I say disability, I also kind of lump it into chronic illness, but seeing it as a negative, as a kind of a setback or something that makes you less worthy or valuable based off of how we're treated in society, which is we all know is wrong. And the biggest thing that I did to kind of change that is to really show how disability can actually be an attribute and be a positive quality that an individual can bring to the workplace as a disabled professional. Really establishing that we exist and that we have a lot to offer, right? So I approached it from I added it right in my resume as additional accomplishments, and at least with Arrow, this is just how I approached it. I added, everything a normal resume has, but then kind of at the bottom, I was like additional accomplishments. And one of the things I put was that I trained my own service dog for me medically, and because of it was able to graduate from college. One of the things I didn't mention was that, and the professors that knew me before Arrow totally saw this, was that I used to run out of class a lot. I used to like panic and then bolt out of class, and then I'd be embarrassed and it'd be hard for me to come back, or I wasn't as focused, or I would skip class altogether. And my attendance rate and my ability to stay in the classroom because of Arrow made a huge difference and a huge reason why I was able to graduate altogether.
Yeah.
And I saw that as an accomplishment, because it really is an accomplishment when you whether it's a service dog or other accommodations, are your own advocate or advocate for yourself and adapt to an environment in a situation that is not designed or built for you, that is a huge strength. Even just existing and surviving and living in environments that are not built for you, which is our society and realistically, most of society, that is powerful. And that is something that I think every disabled person should hear, is that of how that is powerful, just existing in that and in your body, and how beautiful that is. And going into an interview or into college with that mindset can be really helpful. And it can be helpful when when you have your setbacks and you have your moments and you have your pushback from others, reminding yourself of that, and using that kind of as a fire to keep going, because it will pave the way for someone else too. You also have to think about it like that. But yeah, that's how I approached it. And thankfully my employer, I work for, I'm essentially a job coach for other individuals with disabilities, and I go to their work site and provide supports depending on what they might need. I help them learn how to advocate for themselves, how to communicate with management, how to be more efficient and successful in their workplace. And Arrow definitely was obvious that it could be a really helpful tool for the individuals that I support, which it has been. Definitely, it's been helpful for them to learn about service dogs and to be around a service dog and learn how to, navigate service dogs in general, but also have an intimate, or not intimate, but, just like a more personal relationship with Arrow that is helpful and supportive, and when they're anxious or when they're overwhelmed or just need a break, or she needs a break. So yeah, it's been really helpful in that mindset. The other thing I would say is, looking for someone like me, or like InvisiYouth, or other support systems and outlets that can help you as an individual get through, different challenging situations in school of, pushback or access issues, moments like that, for, teaching the tools of what to do, just having that support, having that, person behind you, or people behind you that hear you and understand you and really want the best for you and those accommodations you deserve.
Yeah, and I love how you said it too. It wasn't just how much you became a better student or worker, or even just a better in your social setting, being around your friends or family and being out, sort of being just a generalized public person, and how Arrow made you better and gave you better opportunities because your quality of day to day was being able to be improved with her. But then you also were really a big benefit for people within the service dog community, or those with chronic illness or disability, being able to be like, okay, I always say you have to take it out of yourself and pretend you're the sibling, like that you are your own sibling, and really take yourself out of it. Because like you said, you take your own emotional connection out of it, and really lay out, okay, if somebody's never experienced a chronically ill or disabled person, never experienced a service dog, or might have a timid past experience with dogs in general, what are some situations I might see myself walk into or go into that they would think could be red flags, or are completely unable to adapt to, and how would I be able to adapt to that, and use those, I always say, as the examples that you're able to show, is really super beneficial. If you kind of are able to say, I know you might think this is a roadblock, but this is how you're able to adapt around it. And because you're able to show the ways that you've been more accessible and inclusive as a person with a health issue going into the healthy, non-disabled, quote unquote, community, it allows people being like, oh, okay, it's not as much as the unknown on the other side of the door that a lot of people don't know. And kind of before we go into the last segment, the one thing I wanted to ask, if you've had, from being with Arrow, from a social setting with your friends, or going pre-distancing, going out and about, if you will, what was something that was really has been really beneficial to help you in social public environments with Arrow, to kind of make it easier for you to ease into like out to dinner with friends or walking around? What's something that you would say is like the best suggestion you could give to other people that are wanting to use their service animal more in a social setting with friends around them or going out?
The first thing that comes to mind would be just to be upfront with your friends and open and honest with your friends about you having a service dog and why you have them, or you don't even have to go into that, but what that might mean, of how, in terms of what that might look like, and how they can, you know, better navigate that, which a lot of times it's just she's going to be there and this is what it might look like, and it might not be much explaining to them that it might really actually not be that much different, or I might be more independent, or explaining those things to my friends has been a helpful tool in my family as well, but also just for them to see it, for them to see those moments of where we're going out places and you would never expect a dog to be or to be able to handle, and how normalized it can really be when we put in the training and you work on that team mentality and teach your dog how to be in these environments that aren't built for dogs, in a way that actually helps you and isn't like a burden on other people in some senses, in terms of being a nuisance or acting up. Or normally I joke that, and my friends joke that I'm normally the one that causes way more issues. Like I go into a restaurant and I'm the one to like knock over the bottle and break the glass and spill the water everywhere. And then I get up and then the waiter's like, "You had a dog this whole time?" Like, what? Like, I didn't even realize you had a dog. I'm like, I know, I'm the one causing an issue. And my dog is just like, you would never even know she's there. Like, so it's, oh my goodness.
And I love that it even kind of like you said, it makes for your support network, family and friends, they don't have they're not in your body living the experience. So I always say, if you let them feel less helpless and let them feel like they have a job in a social setting, of even just kind of being your backup, if a hostess is a bit confused and they obviously don't know, you have people with you that it's kind of like their job is to be your backup. And if they feel like they have a job or they know a role they can play, it lets them have a bit more of a sense of comfort too, because otherwise they feel like the unknown. And some of my friends will say, if they're out with me and I'm needing something medication wise, or we're all getting up to leave and the table needs to be used, but I can't stand yet, all my friends will beforehand, if I didn't tell them, they wouldn't know what to do. And everyone started just getting up and leaving. And I was the one stuck there because they would panic. They didn't know what to do. But then when I mentioned to a few of my friends, this is what I need, they would then kind of take that role, being like, okay, I know what I need to ask Dominique. Like I can see there's a red flag. I now can kind of go into my new role. And that's really, I feel you. My friends are like, Dominique, you cause more problems with your muscle spasms and like throwing things over or staring at the waiter, repeating your order twice. And they're like, you already asked, Dominique, stop fogging. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I totally had no idea why you're here.
And I feel like friends too and family can have a really big role in helping to break that stigma and like playing a role in normalizing, we are friends and we are out and she has, medical equipment or medical needs, and that is okay. And that is normal in terms of how they carry themselves. And everyone is deserving of friends and family like that. Okay. And then not everyone has that, but you are deserving of those things. And it does exist. So I think that was something that was really hard for me for a long time, of understanding, like, will my friends like be accepting of this, or, still like, or love me or want to be my friends still. And it's those people do exist, and are really great when you find them. It might take time, but they are out there.
Absolutely. And even kind of going off of that into our final segment, when I just mentioned that Bri goes out and about with Arrow, she obviously needs things with her. And we're going to ask all the different questions to make a playlist for life in our final segment with Bri. And we're going to do What's Your Life playlist.
What's your life playlist? What's your life playlist?
What's Your Life playlist, pretty much as it is. You guys know I mentioned it before. Bri and Arrow's Instagram is just sort of luscious eye candy, but you also see a lot of things that she has out and about with her. So we're going to go through and create a life playlist of things and experiences that would be beneficial for all of us learning more about the service dog community, or things even for those who have. I always say another thing is, if your family or friends do have pets and you're the friend with the chronic illness or disability, things that could be beneficial that you'll learn having outside of that too. So one thing I wanted to ask right away, we always ask, is social media hashtags. You've really built a wonderful community that's super expanding through your Instagram, but if people wanted to take a peek into that and see if it was a good option for them, or learn more about the service dog community, what are hashtags you'll use on your posts with Arrow that are beneficial to kind of learn and find more people in your network and even in your country as well,
Right.
for that difference?
A lot of times I honestly put just the very simple. I've noticed that sometimes the really simple hashtags are actually the ones that have like the biggest impact. So even just simple service dog, but being mindful of that, there are being mindful of how to find, a more legitimate team and supportive team to kind of, what else? I also will look into the kind of service dog that that you might be interested in. So you could search medical alert dog, or say like diabetic alert or migraine alert dog. That could be really helpful because that's more specific to what you might need, or dysautonomia service dog, stuff like that. I'm trying to think. There's like service dogs of Instagram. I like a lot of Not All Disabilities Are Visible, which is somewhat, it's a little different, but primarily a lot of the teams on Instagram have invisible disabilities. Of course, that's not the entirety of the service dog community, but that's just what it is on Instagram. But those are the kind of the top I can think of.
Yeah, and I like as well when you find people like yourself, like I mentioned before, at a different time where you show your tasks with Arrow. That's something you will see with a lot of people. I'll always say, even in activism and chronic illness, you might see that their feed will show other things, but you'll see their highlights and it'll have that label, and that's super beneficial, because that's where that individual or that activist is really showcasing certain tools for them. So I'll always mention that, especially on Instagram. That's really of benefit, because you can kind of see what that platform wants to maintain permanently for other people to have access to. And even going off of that, I know if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that not only behind Bri is Arrow just sort of glamorously in the corner, but above Arrow, there's a lot of harnesses behind her. So I wanted to know, for people who are sort of getting, I know you mentioned when we talked even previously, different types of harnesses you like, or what are kind of your top 4 things that you say you've learned kind of going out with Arrow that are good for you to have in your bag, that are good to have for her?
Yeah, I definitely started off with, vests with like lots of patches and lots of writing, which if that works for some people, then that's great. I have found it to be a little more distracting in terms of how the public's response, because realistically the gear, besides me using it as a training tool for Arrow, for her to know when it's on that there's certain behavioral expectations versus when it's off, it's really for the public essentially, right? And in some cases, in terms of labeling of like, okay, like, why is this dog here? What is this dog? But in some cases, it's also, the gear is really vital to what the dog does and the tasks. So my favorite harness right now actually has 0 writing on it. It's just a simple biothane harness that I use more for like being able to tell if I'm keeping balance or not. And I'll use, if I like forget where I'm at or need to find my mom or whoever else I'm with, like she will like, I'll hold on to it and she'll bring me to where I need to go, stuff like that. Yeah, that's that, like the brown one over, I don't know, it's like kind of, it looks like a mess.
I can see it, yes.
Yeah. That one's my favorite one, and it just looks so good on her. But otherwise, yeah, I started more with like the vests, and then I kind of steered more into the harnesses. I think it depends on your dog, of course, too, of what they're comfortable with. Arrow gets hot really easy, so there's that. Some places I've noticed there's easier access depending on what they're wearing, if they're wearing a vest over a harness. Yeah, it's really preference based. But I also, the other thing I found really helpful is leash wraps. Leash wraps are like what you, they're kind of like patches, but they're long pieces of fabric with embroidered writing on it that wraps around the leash. That's really helpful. So sometimes I'll carry an extra one of those, because I've had crisis kind of moments where I've like gotten to Disneyland and forgot all of her gear and been like, what do I do? So I have like let me grab it. I have like a little pouch, and it looks like this, and I put
oh, look at Arrow right there.
yeah, it looks just like her. It's so funny. But yeah, in it I have, you know, like an extra leash wrap, and I have like paw balm and extra poop bags, and you know, stuff like that. I also have, of course, some medication stuff for me and whatnot. But the other thing I always carry is her updated vet records, always, because there are some places that can require that you provide those and show those.
Oh yeah.
And then also I just printed out the laws for my country, and I actually highlighted some of the main parts.
I love that.
And, you know, that sort of thing. And that would just be from the ADA, so ada.gov for the US. And you can look up, you know, search service dog, frequently asked questions on service dogs. You can print that out, or, you know, that sort of thing. And it has there's like a PDF for businesses specifically of like how to handle when a service dog comes in, and explains all that stuff to them. Some people carry cards, like service dog cards that have the ADA information on that. You can find those like on Amazon, or some people design their own and they put like, you met a service dog, this is Arrow, da, 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 da. Some people do that. But my biggest thing I've noticed, at least with work, is trying to remember I have an extra cup of food for her, because that's also important. Poop bags. I normally carry a collapsible water bowl, and like I was talking about it, we talked about it the other day, a little like nozzle, I should have grabbed it, but it's a little nozzle that converts like a regular water bottle, any different kind of water bottle, into kind of like a little drinking bottle, like almost like what hamsters use, with like a little ball at the end, and it's so that she can drink that easily. Stuff like that, that just make things easier. I keep extra stuff in my car, in my family's cars, but yeah.
I love with all the things that you mentioned too. It's sort of like pseudo having a child's bag on you is sort of like your emergency kit. And even like you said, when you were even casually mentioning, you're like, oh, some of my medications in here too.
Yeah.
It is like a super beneficial. I'll always say, like, even in every bag, because of me having with neurological symptoms, I'll have memory loss, and so me having that in multiple bags that I know I use, or with my mom, who will come with me quite a bit, my sister,
Exactly.
and with her, and my brother-in-law, they'll have those things on them, because a lot of times if I forget something, I'm notorious that I joke that I get chauffeured all the time. I do have a license, I can drive, everybody, at 28. That would be embarrassing in America, but I do have a lot of times being driven, and so I will not bring my license with me, which has gotten me with lots of laughs going out and about and looking 20 years old and not being allowed in places. And so everyone now carries things on my behalf. But having that with, like you said, things that would just be beneficial for Arrow, but then kind of looping the two together. And what I love that you mentioned, because that was the one thing I was going to ask, because I know is those you mentioned the two things you have on you is for the American Disability Act, having that designated government information and her vet records, I think is super beneficial, that there's different versions of that you can carry on you, because it is like having that backup. Like I'll say, I always will tell a lot of young people, if they get a lot of questions on their medical equipment or their illness as well when they go out, if it is invasive, but you unfortunately have to kind of pass through that hurdle to get into a certain place to explain your need, have that in those links saved on your notepad, keep those browsers open. And so it's less of you in a panic having to find it and getting nervous, which happens quite a bit. Your brain will just kind of blank and go, oh my God, what do I don't know what to type in. Like you said, having those available on you really does give you that backup. And also for people who've never experienced a service animal, they then will know from you what they can ask for as well, which I think is beneficial, because you're kind of then taking that step going, I can show you this piece of information, and then they'll know the next time they see someone with their service animal, okay, I remember from that last time that they have X, Y, or Z that I need, or that they need with them. And that's really beneficial for them as well.
Right. Yeah. Just having those things saved, like on your phone. Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, there's also vests that have like pockets and stuff. You can put extra things in those on them, or there's medical bags that like full on bags that they can carry too, that would also do that. So yeah, those are all helpful things.
I was even going to ask, because Arrow popped up right when that happened. Are there things, the right Arrow? Are there, when you are do a lot of times you then kind of take into consideration things that she likes more than as you being the handler? Like you said, sometimes if certain vests or harnesses she might like, is that that's like
absolutely. Yeah, she definitely gets like I mentioned, hotter. Like she gets hot easy. So like the biothane harness, or just a Y front harness in general, is easier, I think, on her on a hot day. It's easy to cool her off that way. Also, the other thing I like to have very handy and accessible are her boots, to protect her paws from hot ground, from debris and that sort of thing. So, which she does not actually like her boots, but she doesn't like the act of putting them on, but once they're on, it's fine.
Sits down and looks at you and is like, Mom, here's my paw, but oh God.
Exactly. She'll be like, she'll give me her paw, but I can tell she's not very happy about it.
The direct eye contact.
Yeah. I'll also kind of consider, depending on where we're going, like bringing like a small blanket or something for her, or an extra jacket I'll just wear, and then I'll just put it on the ground for her, because I don't really mind that. That sort of thing is another thing that I'll do pretty regularly with her.
And I love that. And kind of what we have done at the end of what we do at the end of every episode is this past season is we let our guests kind of give their one piece of advice. So I'd love to know, for someone who may feel nervous about having their service dog more with them, or that first kind of step, what would you say sort of from what you've gained in your life by having Arrow with you, what would be that piece of advice you would give to somebody else who is sort of on that fence of, I really want to, but I'm a little nervous? What would you kind of say from what you've gained?
I would just say, practice, small in your local places, or at, a few places, and then slowly find ways to integrate them. I know that a lot of the nervousness comes from what you were going to say if someone questions you or asks, or how your dog's going to behave, right? Or if they're going to actually help you, which are all really important things to consider, more of the behavioral, and if they're going to actually help you, to be, being, completely honest with yourself and accountable with how you still have to be a responsible dog owner, right? So something that I like to think about is that you're going to have your moments, you're going to have your setbacks, you're going to have your slip ups of, oh, I should have said that differently, or oh my gosh, like they can't behave like that. I think the biggest thing is knowing that stuff's going to happen. Even the most perfect service dogs have their off moments. The thing is how you handle it in the moment as a handler, right? Or even if maybe you didn't handle it right, thinking about those things, really, being just mindful and accountable for those things, and in moving forward, it will make you a stronger and better team and help you be able to fully integrate your dog into your life in a way that is ethical. I think that is something, in terms of breaking the stigma, is so important, right? Is that they're helping you, and that they're in when they're in public, they are representing service dogs and the disability and service dog community as a whole, which is kind of intimidating in a lot, but it's also just something to kind of motivate, I think, you to be, because people will notice how you handle your dog when they do kind of slip up or have a moment of breaking heel or doing a boof or like a bark or whatever, how you handle it versus if you just brush it off, like, whatever. People notice that, and respect that, I think, a lot, which does really make a difference. For non-disabled or people that are disabled that don't have a service dog, the biggest thing is making sure you're not bringing your pets in public, knowing pet policies. I think that is the biggest threat to service dog teams, is pets in public, whether they're nice or well behaved or not. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been lunged at and how it's had an impact on Arrow mentally and me mentally, being, fearful that she's going to get attacked or something like that. Even if your dog's well behaved, you go into a store and people see it and normalizes it, and more people do it, more dogs, more issues there are. So just be really mindful of that.
I love that. Yeah. And I really like that you mentioned that as well. It gives a lot more, not only just awareness, but then lets people know that they can not only just ask questions, but there are so many people, which I didn't even realize into the years of being asked about service animals. There are so many people who have them that they don't showcase it as often because they know they get a lot of questions because it's so unfamiliar. So having someone like yourself who's young, who's been with Arrow for her entire life as well, that really is beneficial for so many people to then feel comfortable doing even more with their service animal in a public setting, and then showcasing it, because that's really where, like you said, it brings more safety for people like yourself who do use them and have that benefit, which is really wonderful. And I have to say that Arrow has been one of my favorite podcast guests I've had. Doesn't interrupt, just gives you her perfect eye contact. I've been very appreciative of having the two of you for the episode as well. And I want to make sure everybody can find you and Arrow on social media. So if people wanted to find you, where would they go?
On Instagram, if you search "Follow Your Arrow," it normally will pop up. But the full Instagram is at @followyourarrow_GSP, which GSP stands for her breed, German short-haired pointer. But yeah, Follow Your Arrow is where that's at.
And as always, everyone, we'll have Bri and Arrow's handle below. Please make sure you follow her. And you really, like I said, you'll not only get some fantastic photos popping up on your feed, but you'll get to learn so much too. So it's really, really wonderful. And as always, you can find InvisiYouth on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at InvisiYouth. And you can find our InvisiYouth Chat Sessions on YouTube. Arrow's taking over at the end. Arrow's coming out with a bang. I love it.
Oh my goodness.
You can find it and make sure you subscribe in all the different ways as well. Arrow, before we break the set, my friend, I'm loving her. Thank you, Bri, so much. I had an absolute blast, and I can't wait for this to be the first of many times we get to collaborate. And so everyone, and hope you enjoyed this episode, and cannot wait to get to chat with you again on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.